to take the time to recognize this year's recipients. Our first recipient was unable to join us today, but is Curtis Chrysler. He's an associate professor of English at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, and he was awarded $2,158 to travel and examine the African-American artist Jacob Lawrence's full migration series, which is split between the Center for the Study of Modern Art in Washington, D.C., which is part of the Phillips Collection, and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York. He plans to examine the entire series of paintings and letters of Lawrence at these museums for documentation. Along with the Lawrence data, he will gather regional and historical documentation on the need to foster African American museums and their function in urban communities. Chrysler's data will be used to complete a creative research project called Playbook for an Urban Midwestern Sensibility, Crafting Work Across Genres. This project encompasses a collection of multi-genre writings that embody what he's defined as an urban Midwestern sensibility, the community and creativity of the varied relationships of Black descendants from the Southern migrations, and explores their connections to environment and place history, family, and self. By creating Playbook for an Urban Midwestern Sensibility, Crafting Work Across Genres, he will exhibit in the genres of poetry, fiction, drama, and essay the validity of the histories and legacies of urban Midwesterners and their collective contribution to the Black aesthetic and the New Black. Our second recipient is Jennifer Foray, an associate professor in the Department of History, who was awarded $3,921 to conduct archival research in the Netherlands. Her present book project, entitled Imperial Aftershocks, The Intersection of War and Decolonization in the Netherlands, explores how, after 1945, various Dutch political actors tried to process their own recent experiences of Nazi occupation and, at the same time, conceptualize a rapidly changing series of events that then unfolding in the East Indies. In 1949, this long-standing Dutch colony would become the newly independent Republic of Indonesia. Of critical importance to the book manuscript are the publications and organizational records of the Dutch Communist Party, or CPN, which, during the decolonization period of 1945 to 1949, consistently and vocally supported Indonesian independence, the only major Dutch political party to do so. A Library Scholars Grant will fund Jennifer's travel to Amsterdam and 4 weeks of research in the CPN collections at the International Institute for Social History, a leading research center for the study of work, labor relations, and leftist political parties. Foray first received a Library Scholars Grant in 2011, which allowed her to begin archival research in the Netherlands the following fall. Our next recipient is Kenneth Kincaid, Associate Professor of History at Purdue North Central, who was awarded $5,000 to travel to the Ministerial and Judicial Archives in Quito, Ecuador, to conduct research on an indigenous uprising in northern Ecuador and its aftermath in support of a chapter, 1959, in the Perils of Progress for his book, Imbacucha, A Social and Ecological History of Lake San Pablo. Of particular interest in Kincaid's research is how national attitudes towards Native people were evolving in response to indigenous activism and international pressures. The Library Scholars Grant will allow Kincaid to conduct research for 4 weeks at the Archive of Ecuador's National Court of Justice, which houses court documents from the hearings on the massacre, and of the National Assembly, which holds documents that reflect the national debate on Native peoples in the state. Following his research stint, Kincaid will spend his fall sabbatical working on his monograph. Next is Dawn Marsh, Associate Professor of History, who was awarded $2,921 to support travel to the Navajo Nation and Oaxaca, Mexico, to conduct research on a book-length project. The research begins and ends with the Navajo blanket, one of the most iconic and familiar images of Native American material culture. The research will focus on the ebb and flow of knowledge transmitted through the mechanism of Spanish colonization that transformed textile production in the Americas. Research will be conducted in the ethnographic collections at the Arizona State Museum in Tucson and at the Navajo Nation Museum and Navajo Technical University. Research in Mexico includes the archival collections held in the Museo Regional de Oaxaca, Museo Textil de Oaxaca, and Regional de Antropología. And our final recipient is Jennifer Zaspel. No. And our final recipient is Jennifer Zaspel, Assistant Professor of Entomology, who's awarded $5,000 to travel to the British Museum of Natural History to examine museum specimens and original literature related to the vampire moth genus Calyptra. The British Museum of Natural History has the largest holdings of Calyptra specimens, including holotypes. The museum also has a comprehensive taxonomic library with rare literature that contains original descriptions and color plates for relevant species in her research system. Zaspel's research is focused on the taxonomy and evolution of host switching and odorant systems in Calyptra lineage. So the primary objective is to complete a revised checklist of vampire moths and their fruit-piercing relatives and undertake a taxonomic revision of the vampire moth genus Calyptra. So please join me in congratulating all of the 2015 grant recipients. So we look forward to hearing more about your research and how the Library Scholars Grant was able to assist at next year's luncheon. So now we actually are going to have a slight change to the program. Perhaps one of our speakers is having some difficulties getting here due to inclement weather up in the northern part of the state. Dr. Zimmer will hope he can make it perhaps later in the luncheon. But we're going to start with our 2013 grant recipient, Dr. Catherine Dossin, Associate Professor of Art History at Purdue West Lafayette, who will share her research and travels. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dossin.
I could not present last year because I was traveling, so my trip took place in 2013 when I was awarded a scholar grant to go to Rennes in France to the Archives de la Critique d'Art, or the Archive of Art Criticism. This is a rather new institution which was really started in the 1990s. But since we are here to talk about archive, it's a very interesting place because it's one that was started from the grassroots by scholars who wanted to gather some material that were important to their research and really put their effort together to create an institution. There were a lot of art historians who were interested in art critics and their work, their archive. They knew them, they knew they were starting to get old and wondering what would happen to all their material. And apart from the very, very famous one who could maybe make it in big archive, the other would just disappear, or some of the letter to famous artists would be sold, but we would lose everything. So a group of art historians put their resources together, and one man in particular, Jean-Marc Poinceau, really worked very hard to get those material, find places, find a house for this. So it's started in 1988, the idea. In 1998, they had the collection. And in 2008, they moved to their new location. It is really a fantastic place that is unfortunately not used enough because it gathers a lot, really most of the important art critique of the second part of the 20th century. It has all their letters to artists, critics, collectors, dealers, but also all their libraries. And the library are not just books, but also brochures, things that library would not collect because they are small material. So it's really like the entire art world at your hand, especially not the most famous art critic. They are there, but also people who are not very important, but whose work is important. So it's really great, but it has a lot of problems. Just to give you an idea. It's not in Paris, which is a problem for everybody in France. It is in Rennes, which is a beautiful city, but it's a bit far. And it is in an industrial zone of Rennes, where there is nothing but this. So that's one problem. The other problem is that because it's not a private, but an independent institution, they have no money, no support, very little staff. And when I was there, they were in big crisis. the staff had to accept a budget cut so that they could make it until the fall, hoping the budget from the region would come, and they were in all discussion about merging with the university in Rennes. So it was very tense. They had meeting all the time. It was like really intense when I was there. But so the reason what happened is that it's open at weird hours, at weird day, and to actually have 2 weeks of work, I had to be there for 3 weeks. And they close for an hour and a half for lunch. So you end up in the middle of an industrial zone with nothing to do. Just to say that if you want to be, they are open on Monday, but close on Tuesday, open on Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday. Not even Friday. So it's really awful, even for friends. And then you need to order your thing in advance, and there is one person. So meaning that nobody goes there, and it's not used, and you really need to be committed to go. But it is a fantastic place where there is a lot. And for me, what I wanted to do going there was to find information on the reception of American art in Europe. It's a subject I've been working on for a long time, and I always wanted to go to the archive. It never happened before because I thought that I would be able to get a lot of different sources, things that you don't get in the big library, things that you don't get in the big resource, that I would find new material. One of the things I was very interested in is to be able to get brochures, material that are not collected, things like statements in the letter of critic, things that are not reproduced 20 times already, but new material. And I found a lot, so that was really great. So the first thing I really did when I was there was to look for exhibition that happened in Europe featuring American artists. And I have been building this database of exhibition of American art in Europe from 1945 to 1975 for a long time. And I have almost like all the big exhibition. That's not a problem. But here I could get a lot of, exhibition I've never heard of, brochure, like, not the catalog, the brochure announcing those things in a lot of gallery that nobody's recording this, but those were events that took place that people could see. Also, I saw a lot of review of artists that I don't even know, nobody knows really, but they were there. So when I looked at the critics, I saw all those things that, exploded my data with many other things, giving it a more rounded feeling. So this database that I am creating is part of a project, the Triumph of American Art, that I'm doing in collaboration with the GS, the Purdue GS Library. And I'm not going to discuss art class today. I think some of you know already. If you want to hear about it, I can talk about it later. But it's a big project. And in brief, what it allows us to do is by taking all this data on exhibition, we can do quantitative analysis, map it. So this is what Nicole Kong, with the GIS librarian, helped me doing. So we can then query this data because it's too many exhibitions, I cannot do anything, and do search in many ways to get information. We can do quantitative analysis. It's really a very nice way to supplement close reading of text with those distant reading of those data. So it's quite helpful. And for me, at the time when I was in Rennes, actually I was finishing the typescript for my manuscript. So I was able to integrate this in all the maps. So the maps that are in the book are connected to it. So, and I felt better because I thought that I was not just talking about the big thing that we have been recorded, but more what really happened. And I use this also quantitative data for several articles I published since then, like this one on pop art and abstract expressionism. So it was very helpful. But I would say the most interesting being in Rennes and looking at the archive was discovering artists I had never heard of. Okay, I knew Jean-Franklin Koenig, but Claire Fleckenstein, never heard. And many other that, and I know a lot of unknown artists, but there was all those artists that had exhibition, that critics were referring, all those, really what happened in Paris in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, even 80s in art institution, museum, gallery that have disappeared, but that made what people could see, what people could understand, the really imaginary of American art in Europe. And it was a completely different story. Lawrence Galgano, I doubt you know about him, but he was very visible and really everywhere. So what I saw was a completely different story of American art that was evolving in front of me. And there was like a lot of little sub-story. And just to take one example, it's the School of the Pacific. Something that I had seen many times, but the idea that there was the School of New York, that's very important artist, but there was the West Coast artists with the School of the Pacific, and they were as important, they were very, and the European loved them. And everybody, when I talked about it, like other art historians, they were like, no, it did not exist. But it really bothered me, and when I was in the archive, I saw a lot of things, like a magazine where there would be pool of the most important artists, and artists connected to this school would be listed as the most important, so changing. I also found like this is a draft for an article where the art critic, Pierre Restani, is just drafting what he sees about American art. And he put those artists and the School of the Pacific at the top. And so knowing that this is somebody who's really in favor of American art, like it, was quite interesting. And for me, it showed that we tend to see a French critic or European critic as very negative toward American art, but I think it's not the right way. It's more that there was things they really loved and things they did not really like. And it happened that a lot of things they liked have disappeared, did not make it in the official American story of American art, but were important in Europe and were supported, visible. So looking at all this, based on what I saw there, really, and this is just one example, as I say, that made me start to think about other questions that I wanted, and this is my new project on which I have been working since then, on what I call Scene from Paris, a French history of American art, in which I want to write the history of American art, but not from an American point of view, but from a French or Parisian point of view. And this is something that I have trouble, because Paris is not just French people, it's like Paris, where people from all over the world are, but how they could imagine American art. And I know in history, since there is so many historians, this is something that has been done a lot, to write the history of a country from the perspective of another country. And I've read fantastic books. In art history, it has not been done, but I would like to do the same. So I don't know if it's going to work, but just to say that the trip to Rennes was really very interesting, just to be able to spend that much time in this great archive that is so difficult to access, really. And to be able to look at all this material not only helped me to do what I plan to do going there, and give me a lot of amazing footnotes for my books and maps and graphs and things, but also helped me define my next project. So I'm very grateful. Thank you. Do you want me to?
I'm not sure what they want. Okay. So thank you very much for sharing your insight and expertise. So it looks like our other speaker was not able to make it, so we will do what we can to either reschedule a presentation another time, or perhaps find some other way to make sure that his story is heard, because I think that his project was really quite interesting, and it would be great for everyone to be able to hear about it. So with that concludes today's presentations. Oh, sure.
Oh, okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Mullins, the Dean of Libraries. And one of the things that I enjoy each year is having this opportunity to really see the impact that an endowment can have that was created by some very foresighted people, the class of 1935. And as far as we know, the last member of that class passed away in January at the age of 101. So you can see that not only were they incredibly committed to the future, they lived into the future. But I just wanted to acknowledge them once again. The other thing that I wanted to mention is those of you who are not in the libraries will probably not know, but the Purdue Libraries have been named were given the award of the 2015 Award for Excellence of University Libraries by the Association of College and Research Libraries. One of the elements that they spoke to was this program, that this was a unique commitment by the libraries to show and support young scholars in advancing their research. They thought that was particularly admirable in the accomplishments of the libraries. So I just wanted to have that opportunity to not only acknowledge the class of 1935, but to acknowledge the insight that they had in making this commitment to young scholars, and that it's something unique really to Purdue. And in fact, when I had to respond to, I responded to several comments from other universities asking me about this program. And they all admitted they had never heard of anything like it. They had heard of programs to bring people to their campuses, but not to send them to other campuses and other universities. So Purdue is very unique in that. And I appreciate the incredible work that all of the people here have done, both the committee and the scholars. And we learn from the things that you bring back to us. The element that, Catherine, the issue you had with access. I was thinking that Sammy would be here, and knowing that we're always discussing about the issues and the challenges of providing the kind of access that scholars need when they come to use our archives. Luckily, we are much better than yours, much better. But I just think it's such an informative thing to us to hear about how archives, the importance and the role they play, and other libraries, but the archives specifically, play in the advancement of research and scholarship. Thank you.